Hello. I haven't made a video in a while, but I wanted to update you. My name is Jeremiah for the Big Ball Jerry Show. I might change the name too. Um, my goal on this channel was to talk about football, something that I really enjoy. Um, I've made a lot of really good, structured opinions and predictions in the past about the sport and about what directions teams might go in, what predictions for the season, learning about players, talking about teams, talking about coaches, just with my friends and stuff over the years. And I was like, what? Maybe I should invest some time in actually um, trying to make it into something I could make on YouTube. And I started by, talking about the basics. But once I got done with the basics, which was a video that I made like 2 months ago, I was like, what do I do now? And for a while, I've been struggling thinking about what I should be doing next. And really, for me, I think now I look at it and I'm like, well, it'd be great if I dived into what I think matters versus what other people think matters. Um, and I think one of the major things is there's a lot of YouTubers out there that don't really agree with me on some of this stuff. There's a lot of talking heads that don't agree with me. There's a lot of YouTubers I very much respect that don't agree with me, especially on quarterbacks. And I think that explaining what I think about quarterbacks should help people's perspective on what is good about quarterbacks, what is bad about quarterbacks, why quarterback tiers are a little silly, honestly. And I think that's where learning about the sport should really start, or even relearning the sport. I think we should all start with Geno Smith. Geno Smith last year had this, as many people would say, crazy season that no one expected except for me. I expected it. I expected all of it. I said that he was going to have 28 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He ended up having 31 touchdowns to 11. And when I look back at the season, it's everything I said. I said he was accurate. I said he could move the football. I said he could play in rhythm, which is something that some quarterbacks can't do as well as others. I said that he was going to be really good at that. He was. Um, I gave him credit for being able to utilize the deep ball even better than I thought he was going to. But at the same time, the offensive, I would say, limitations as far as the amount of receiving threats, as far as the route trees that we incorporated into the offense showed their head late in the season because we just didn't expect the offense to have to play this much. Um, and as a Seahawks fan, I am a little bit biased, but I never thought Geno Smith was just a useless quarterback. I think that the term that a quarterback's washed or used up is overrated. I think that a lot of quarterbacks that get into the draft and get drafted should have a good shot at being great players, mainly because we view quarterback as this thing that you have to be the best that's analyzed. But people like Jalen Hurts, Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, Kurt Warner, um, even like a Lamar Jackson, these people that really didn't go until the second, third, fourth. Oh, Dak Prescott, fifth, sixth round, right? Even Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins was a fifth round pick. All these players weren't really seen as a high probability of starting or even being a capable NFL quarterback, and yet they all were. And some of them even won Super Bowls that I just mentioned. Um, so I think when it comes to analyzing quarterbacks, we should really think about what they do. And in order to explain this, we go back to my last video about formations being like musical, symphony and all that, right? So right now, if you're a football fan, you know this. A lot of people have this, I would say, warped perception where you got Mahomes way up here, and then you got uh, I would say Josh Allen and Joe Burrow for some reason. Those are the only two that go there, and then everyone else after that. And in my opinion, it's way more like, well, Mahomes is still on the top. Now, the reason why Mahomes is on the top is different than what a lot of other people think. A lot of people say it's because he's just the best athlete. I disagree. I think Josh Allen's the best athlete. A lot of people say it's because he's really smart. I think that Joe Burrow and Geno Smith are the smartest quarterbacks in the NFL right now. And we'll see next season if that's true, but I believe it. The reason why Mahomes is the best is because of his throwing motion. Because in the NFL in the 21st century, offenses rely a lot on passes, on rhythm, on concepts to disrupt the defense. If you've ever seen Patrick Mahomes throw, I can only name like half of his passes look nice. Most of them look really sloppy and off time, and that's why they work. Because Mahomes throws in a rhythmic pattern that's really hard for defenders to get a read on. The reason why you see people like Geno Smith or Burrow, or even like some of the greats like Manning and Brady have struggles against certain teams they play a lot is because they have very succinct, professionally drawn out throwing motions that may be wonderful and beautiful, but are more easy to read if you don't have a complex route tree on your offense. If you're like Mahomes or Russell Wilson or some of those players, you have an ability to separate your passes in a way that can't be diagrammed, can't be easily perceived by defenders. So that's why Mahomes can put up all these points in the fourth quarter. That's why the Chiefs are never out of a game, because even if your running game isn't working, even if your offensive line is doing the best that day, Mahomes can still throw that ball in a way that no one can really read professionally well. Now, when it comes to the second tier, there's a debate here. Now, do you want the quarterbacks that are going to win Super Bowls, that are likely to win Super Bowls, or do you want the quarterbacks that are likely to have the best regular season records? Because those are two different things. If you want the quarterbacks to have the best regular season records consistently, I would say Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Tua, Jimmy Garoppolo, Brock Purdy. Yeah, that's about it. I put that in my list. Oh, maybe Jared Goff I put there too, because they all have unique traits that make them pliable. They all have techniques that make them potent from the start of a season to the end of a season. They don't have, I think, the it factor that makes them playoff. I can win any playoff game at any time. Because when I look at them play, I go, well, Josh Allen may be a great athlete, which means, yeah, in the regular season, he can just dominate teams. But in the playoffs, when you've got teams that have studied you, that maybe even played you before that season, they understand your route trees. They understand what you're going to do. They see your weaknesses. Then I have Burrow and Geno. And I have them in this other class, which is, yeah, they're not Mahomes, because Mahomes has a throwing motion that no one can duplicate. But they are so good at reading defenses. That is the one thing that you cannot defeat as a defense completely. Geno Smith in his one playoff game had a 98 rating against the top defense in the NFL. Do you know what Dak Prescott had against them? Do you know that Jalen Hurts didn't play that well against San Francisco either? Like, in all honesty, he didn't. A lot of people forget this. A lot of people forget that despite the fact that fans dunk on Geno, he had the 26th ranked offensive line. He had a bottom 10 defense. And he had his running backs injured for at least 5 games that season, and his best receiver out for the big Chiefs game that they could have probably won if he was there. Then you have, Burrow. Burrow still has a terrible offensive line for like the last 3 years. He's went to the Super Bowl. He's had a better defense, which is why I think he's been able to reach it. But at the same time, you look at the players, you look at their stats, you look at their risks, you look at their interceptions, you go, well, these players are kind of similar a little bit. And as much as we said Burrow threw a lot of interceptions, who else threw a lot of interceptions in their first few years? Geno Smith. And Joe Burrow had a better coach, by the way. There's no debate. One went to an AFC Championship game and to the Super Bowl. The other one went to fire their offensive coordinator that's worked in several different places with really good quarterbacks. And then the head coach ran the team into the ground over the next 2 seasons. Well, I'm not even really including Geno, to be all honest. So at the end of the day, That's what I want to make the channel about. I want to make it about Geno. I want to make it about Joe Burrow. I want to make it about how I think that Josh Allen is weirdly perceived as this top three quarterback, but it's really strange to me that Lamar Jackson um, and Jalen Hurts are in the same exact tier for me. Like they all play similar ball. Yeah, Josh Allen has a slightly stronger arm, but I would say Lamar Jackson's more elusive than him. I would say Jalen Hurts um, has less good receivers than him, like in general. Um, and honestly, all of them have weaknesses and strengths, and they all are a little different. But their main thing is they are a mobile quarterback that can pass the ball pretty well and have not great but decent accuracy. When I watched Josh Allen play his best games and his best ball, I think of him like I thought of Russell Wilson. He can win a game. He can strong arm the other team, but if you put it in a coverage that he can't conceptually break down through his play, he's not that great. He just isn't. And the fact that people continuously try to put these types of players in a situation where they don't have a great running game and a great O line and a really strong defense is bad because that's not how they win football games. In fact, that's not how any team wins football games. Now, the only other thing I'll bring up about this conversation is that as much as I say that Joe Burrow and Geno are on this level, they are still below Mahomes because Mahomes doesn't need a top 15 defense. I think if the Seahawks or the Bengals want to go to the Super Bowl, they have to have a top 13 offensive line and a top 10ish defense. I would say that's the requirements for their quarterbacks to reach that level. And they need really good wide receivers. Remember, Joe Burrow and Geno Smith have some of the best wide receiver cores in the NFL. For Mahomes, it's give me a great offensive line and I can win you a Super Bowl. He can win a Super Bowl with the 20th ranked defense and like a very middling receiving core as long as he has his one tight end that's pretty good. So I think that that's the main thing that I look at is that yes, the tiers are weird to me because I think Mahomes is a transcendent talent. And I think that Geno and Joe Burrow have the most ability to be consistent winners. Because Mahomes, just like the other mobile quarterbacks I mentioned, moves around a lot. He runs. He gets injured. He almost got too injured to go to the Super Bowl this year. Um, and I think that that's going to be something that shortens his career. Now, people are also going to ask me, well, why didn't I put Aaron in the top three? And this is actually really simple. Now, a lot of fans don't like that Geno throws interceptions or that he has I think it was the highest or second highest turnover worthy throws or something like that. Um, now, again, the route stuff is definitely a part of it because I did see those stick concepts way too much in the second half of the season. Like, if you remember, a good half of Geno's interceptions were on stick routes on second, third down, and once a team sees those enough, they're gonna cloud under, and Geno calls the plays like Pete and the Shane want him to be called because he's a great quarterback and he thinks he can make those throws. But sometimes teams are just gonna read him, and I think that their offense was a little too simplistic down the stretch. Now, that's why I think he had more turnover worthy throws in the second half of the season. I think that in general, when you think about production, the reason why Geno and I think Burrow are in different league than Aaron Rodgers per se, or Jimmy Garoppolo is because they don't take a lot of risks. They go for the easy pass. They go for the I won't ruin the game, but I also won't win it. And although we will definitely see Geno make some bad plays this season, I have him having 11 interceptions. I have him making some dumb plays in the first, second quarter. But when the fourth quarter turns on, Geno doesn't mess up, man. And I think that's another big underrated thing is that Geno and Burrow are unbelievable in the fourth quarter. Unbelievable. Geno only threw, I think, one interception. I trying to remember any other game that he did. I guess the Niners. So he had two interceptions in the fourth quarter the entire season. That's insane. And just remember, he threw a touchdown pass in Germany against the Bucks top 10 defense in the fourth quarter when they needed points, 20 yards away from the end zone to Marquise Goodwin. He converted um, he converted touchdowns. He converted his only touchdown against the Niners in the fourth quarter with 4:25 left on the clock. He has scored touchdowns, I think, in almost every game this season in the fourth quarter, past the first 4 weeks where everybody's saying he's only a first half quarterback. So I don't really understand the distaste for Geno Smith. Joe Burrow, not so much, but I still think that's a little weird that he's put on the same level as Allen when he clearly has better overall consistent mechanics than Allen. I find that a little strange. But I think Geno is the one that's the most disrespected because when I look at his anticipation, when I look at his throwing patterns, when I look at how he has assembled and continued to run the offense with Shane Waldron and Pete, I think of nothing but professionalism. And you may say that, oh, well, he should have been able to get the ball out here and here and here. And I'm like, well, then I have to remind people this is his third year starting at football games. People say he's a journeyman quarterback. Journeyman quarterback is Carson Wentz, who had 4 different starting opportunities, who went to 3 different teams that started him multiple times for full seasons. A journeyman quarterback is like Ryan Fitzpatrick, who started for, I think it is 5 teams. Isn't that what people said? He started for like 5 different football teams. A journeyman quarterback is Kirk Cousins, who is the headline quarterback for many good offensive lines and great receivers through Washington and the Vikings. Geno Smith's not a journeyman quarterback. He started 2 seasons, never got to get to start again, other than one game when everyone hated him because Eli Manning was supposed to get his start record, and then he played 3 games while Russell was injured, and actually started to look really good in that last one. And then this season he goes off and he has a great third starting season because it takes quarterbacks time to have great seasons. And as much as I understand people's distaste for me saying that Geno's going to be the MVP this season because, quote, he's a journeyman, or that, he hasn't proven enough to us yet. I think that that's a whole bunch of baloney. He's proven to me that he's improved every season he's gotten to start. He's proved to me that he has learned tons in the years that he's been away from being a starter. He's proven to me that during one off season this year, I expect him to be significantly better. Else I'll be disappointed in him because I think that he has potential to be a top 3 quarterback in the NFL for the next 5 to 6 years. I also think that the idea that they front load his contract, of course they did, because he allowed them to. And this is the other thing I understand. If John Schneider thinks Geno Smith is going to be the next Peyton Manning, he would still front load contract if Geno's willing to do it. Do you not know how football works? Yeah, the Seahawks might think he's the next great thing, but if they can front load his contract and get a Hall of Fame quarterback in the draft too, have Geno win a Super Bowl or 2, and then trade him in his 3rd season and get another haul of picks like they did with Russell Wilson, why wouldn't they do that? It makes absolutely no sense. And if Geno gets a huge injury this season and never throws the same way again, because that happens to quarterbacks all the time, or G3 only happened 10 years ago, then you want that front-loaded contract. The only reason why teams do not have contracts all like Geno Smith has is because they can't, and because they have an obligation to have their franchise quarterback get a gigantic contract deal. And that leads to my last thing, which is talking about the quarterbacks that have the best chance of having dynasties. Of course, Patrick Mahomes, because of his hometown discount to the Chiefs. You could count the Eagles, I guess, although Jalen Hurts has a pretty large contract. I'll put the Seahawks on this list because they have a quarterback that's willing to give them a little leeway. They have a quarterback that's willing to say, I'm going to bet myself. They have a quarterback that's willing to probably, if he plays a Hall of Fame year this year and next year, he'll probably totally lessen that cap hit and just extend his contract 2 more years, roll it around a little bit, and give the Seahawks another great opportunity to get some amazing, impactful free agents on his third contract deal season. Now, the other thing is that as much as people like to say, well, Jeremiah, I know even if Gino plays at an MVP level and wins the MVP, he's so old. We need to get a rookie quarterback. We need to get a rookie quarterback. I will combat against that because every NFL team has a position they have to spend a lot of money on. For instance, the Eagles spend a lot on their defensive line. San Francisco spends a lot on their defensive line. Teams like the Titans spend a lot on their offensive line. There's teams that spend money in different places. The Seahawks are good at drafting receivers. They're okay at drafting receivers. They're great at drafting corners. They're decent. They're okay at drafting defensive linemen and offensive linemen. But when I think about free agency, I go, well, John usually can get like pretty solid safeties. He can get pretty solid cornerback if you give him the room, right? um, he can get you a really solid receiver that can just fill a role for a season. He can get you a solid tight end that can fill a role for a season. He can give you a solid offensive lineman that can fill a role for a season. Even a running back. If you remember Mike Davis in 2018, he was pretty solid. He was a John Schneider pickup. But for me, when I think about it, I go, well, if Gino's willing to sign this team-friendly contract every time, then why can't him being MVP be enough to bring the Seahawks to a Super Bowl a few times, or even once? Because a lot of people say that's impossible that Gino is good enough to get us to one Super Bowl, which I find a little disrespectful. Because we have only seen him in one playoff game. He had a 98.6 rating. He had a touchdown, I think. Yeah, he had one touchdown, or was it two? It might have been two. No, yeah, he had one touchdown, one interception, one fumble, and 98.6 is exactly what Tom Brady has through all of his seasons of going to the Super Bowl and going to playoff games. And Russell Wilson didn't have a 98 rating till he was in the playoffs, till he was in his like fifth season. It's just not lining up for me why he can't be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I don't see the numbers. If he can play against number one defense and have a 98.6 rating, lead that team into halftime with absolutely no defensive run stopping abilities, with a makeshift offensive line in the middle that has a center that is closer and closer to retirement, with a guard that's closer and closer to retirement, with a partially injured running back and a partially injured second best wide receiver, and no third wide receiver because I think Goodwin was still injured at that point. Why are we saying that he can't do better next year with Jackson Smith-Njigba, a fully healthy Tyler Lockett, a better offensive line, a far better defense, and probably a better special teams unit, honestly? When I look at some of the Seahawks free agent pickups, I think about that too. So I don't see it. I don't see why my opinion is so crazy and outlandish. And last year I said Gino was going to be an MVP candidate. I said that he could be a pretty solid player. I said that he could be a Pro Bowler, and he was. He was everything I said he was going to be. I said he'd have a second half of the season slide because it's a new offense. It's his first time playing a full season in like 6-8 years. The fact that fans think that he should have been perfect all throughout the season is insane. How can you expect a player to play perfectly through an entire season when they haven't played an entire season in 6 years? That's like if I went to school. A lot of people know this, thing about school, right? If you don't go to school for years and then you go back, it's always harder to get through those last quarter or two than if you've always been doing it. So that's why I kind of have to go against that. And at the end of the day, this just leads to what I want to do with the channel, is just talk about what I think about players, what I think about teams, what I think about what they're going to do. I'd ask you for a prediction before the schedule came out. I would say the Seahawks, the Eagles, the 49ers, and the Lions are all jockeying for that top NFC position. I would say, if you're going to ask me which teams are overrated, I would definitely say the Saints. I don't think anyone else is, honestly. I mean, the Panthers could be good. The Packers could be good. The Bears technically could be okay. I just think the Saints are very much overrated. They have an aging Derek Carr. They have an aging roster. They have an aging Alvin Kamara. They have an aging Taysom Hill. They just even have like a really bad cap situation with a head coach that I don't trust in any situation. Apparently, except for against the Seahawks, when they can just have Taysom Hill win the game for them. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like I don't get that either. Last thing I'll say about teams and players and coaching is I want to talk about coaches real quick because that's something else I'm going to be mentioning a lot in the future. Most respected coaches, it's weird. You got Mike Tomlin, you got Pete Carroll, and you have I think Mike Vrabel, because Mike Vrabel gets talked about like twice a year. And the reason why all these coaches are, I think, disvalued is because they've been in the league for a while. And they have defensive teams. The fact that Mike Vrabel has won winning seasons with Ryan Tannehill this many times and still hasn't gotten, I think, the respect he deserves is insane. The fact that Mike Tomlin has yet to have a losing season with the Steelers. The Steelers in the same division as the Ravens and the Bengals. The Browns, pretty easy to get wins against them. But the other ones, yeah, that's going to be hard to do. And of course, Pete Carroll had one of the most legendary defenses of all time. Had a third round quarterback become a franchise guy who won a Super Bowl, went back to another, and had everyone thinking he should be a top 5 quarterback. The fact that he allowed Geno to come into his system, to learn, to become a great quarterback. Yeah, Pete Carroll's in that is honestly one of the best coaches in the NFL. And I think, just like with the quarterback tiers, I think coaching tiers are stupid too. Do I think that Pete Carroll is smarter than Kyle Shanahan at game planning? No. Do I think he's better than Kyle Shanahan at making practices, at building a culture? Yeah. Do I think either one is more important than the other? Not necessarily. That's why I think ranking things like that is kind of strange. Like, I could definitely say that Bill Belichick could be the best, or that Andy Reid could be the best head coach of all time just because of their track records, especially in the modern era. But other than that, I mean, how can you rank them really? I mean, you can say they won. You could say Pete Carroll's won a Super Bowl. You could say Mike Tomlin won 2 Super Bowls, so he should be like the second best head coach in the NFL. But I don't get that either. So at the end of the day, all I'm going to say is rankings are ridiculous. Geno Smith should be an MVP candidate in your mind after hearing about what I said. I very much disagree with the fact that we needed to take Anthony Richardson. I also disagree with the fact that we shouldn't have at all if he fell to us, because at the end of the day, quarterbacks are overvalued. They have great trade value. You want to keep them long enough to give you success, but you don't want to keep them too long to have them become I would either consider it a liability, like an Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson or Tom Brady or what's the other one? Brett Favre. There's all these quarterbacks in the past. They stay with the team too long. They don't retire at the right time. They start to drag the team down with them. I mean, Russell, I love Russell, but his whole Team 3 thing, the way he dealt with Pete, the way he dealt with the media, definitely had influence. The way that he asked for tight ends, it had to have been him now, because the fact that 2 years of him not being here has made it so we haven't overpaid a tight end makes me very questionable on who really wanted Jimmy Graham here, who really wanted Greg Olsen here. Because I look at Pete and I'm like, he says Will Dissly's good enough. I mean, John Schneider and Pete Carroll go, Will Dissly's good enough. We don't need another tight end. Oh, yeah, we like Noah Fant. We're going to give him that 5th year option. We're not going to sign him to a huge deal after that, but we're going to give him that 5th year option. Yeah, Parker, he's great. He's a 5th round pick. But if you're going to ask them to put in more than that, they're going to say no. So it makes you question that. The fact that when you look at the evidence, moving on with a Hall of Fame head coach and getting another quarterback that's in your system already and giving them the wheel, that's a smart thing to do. It just is. It is. Unless you're like, Bill Belichick and you decide to not hire an offensive coordinator after his first really good season. Don't know why he did that to Mac Jones. But yeah, at the end of the day, those are my opinions on the NFL. I can't wait to share more with you all. I'm gonna figure out a release schedule someday. But until then, please subscribe. Um, let me know what you think about this video. I'm excited to see what's next. All right. Bye.